gotta go fast.
Welcome to the Utterly Nonsense Podcast. I'm your host with the most, John Kaggs, joined as always by CJ DeLeo, and with our guest once again, Paris Womack. How are we all doing?
Pretty good, John. Good to hear from you. Even though we've been talking for the past 2 hours, waiting for, to record.
Yeah, waiting for absolutely nothing, just talking about anything and everything as we lead in to our first topic of the day, which is probably the most talked about topic on the internet as of right now, the Sonic the Hedgehog trailer. Where do we start with this?
Okay, so first of all, good or bad? Just like straight out statement, all cards on the table. Did you like the trailer or did you hate it?
Hate it.
Okay, well, as far as like the trailer goes on its own, like aesthetics aside, I didn't think it was too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like first of all, I like Jim Carrey, and I'm gonna like him in anything. So I like that Jim Carrey's in it, and that's basically my only reason to have an interest in it as of now. And yeah, of course, I like the way he looks at the end of the trailer when he has the full-on Robotnik look. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, I read somewhere that the reason why that's actually in the movie is because they had to go back and do reshoots just to include things that actually reference the video game, like, whoever it is, the execs that looked over the movie when it was in progress, saw that they had almost nothing connecting it to the games. No references, no anything. So they had to reshoot stuff back in. So that's why he has the new look. But,
yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. So I do want to say, just generally speaking, I did kind of enjoy the trailer, like obviously the big talking point, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but the big talking point that a lot of people have had is that just Sonic looks just terrible. Like the CGI
Disgusting.
is just lousy, which so I will say, like, we've seen, like, just from initial posters, just from initial sneak peeks, exactly what Sonic was going to look like. So I feel like I've had enough time to process this that it wasn't exactly shocking to me. It wasn't exactly like outwardly disturbing to me. So for that reason, like, I went in just expecting that to be the worst part of the trailer, and I was right. Like, for the most part, I actually really enjoyed the trailer. Jim Carrey obviously stole it. He makes a great Robotnik. That whole sort of scene between him and Damien Dark is just like,
yeah, Damien Dark, right?
Yeah, I know, right? He was just like, classic Jim Carrey. So
what is that actor's name?
I have
Sam
no
Rockwell
clue, man.
or something?
No, that's not Sam Rockwell.
Who's Sam Rockwell? Why did that name come to mind?
I don't know. It's like not even like they don't even look even like remotely similar. So I don't know where you're getting
I have
that
no
from.
idea who that is, so I don't know how I know that name.
Yeah, no, he's one of those character actors that's sort of been in everything.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, aside from the actual CGI on Sonic himself, I think the visual effects actually do work pretty well. Obviously there's not too much beyond Sonic aside from like some of the Robotnik gadgets, but you do see Sonic running like ridiculously fast. You do see him in his sort of like iconic ball form. And it all sort of works,
Yeah, Paris, what'd you think?
Yeah,
Being the Sonic guy.
I feel like it looked good in motion. I can say that much. But when we weren't looking at Sonic, it looked fine.
Yeah, so now let's break down like what exactly is wrong with this character design. I'm not even looking at it right now. I just have the image burned into my skull.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard to forget.
So, number one, the blue arms. Now, I know they did this in Sonic Boom already, but come on, it just does not look right. It's too much blue. You need the apricot color to break it up. His arms are supposed to be apricot, like his center and his face. Don't you think?
they said their reason for that was it wouldn't look right because they wanted him to look realistic, so he'll match with the world. I remember that being their original.
Realistic.
So
right.
the one big problem with that, like, you're definitely getting a sort of uncanny valley thing with this. Like, they're definitely going the realistic route, but to the point that it looks like so close to realistic, but you can't go realistic on a cartoon hedgehog, you know? Like,
yeah, like he's an anthropomorphic freaking hedgehog, and here's the thing, like they put realistic looking fur on him. But then why does he have cartoonish, Pixar-y-looking eyeballs? Like, even in the Pokemon Detective Pikachu thing, they tried to give some of them, like, kind of, like, realistic-ish animal-looking eyes. But with Sonic, it's like, what are they doing? First of all, it doesn't look like Sonic's eyes whatsoever. They're too far apart. They're not large enough. And the pupils are, like, I don't know. They're not thin. They're not the thin ovals that everybody knows that Sonic has always had from the beginning. Like, I feel like that's really iconic to his look, is his eyes.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the biggest thing about the design that bugged me. You know, like his eyes just look like they're a fraction of the size of what we see in the game. You know, well, I shouldn't say in the game, but like in the more iconic forms of the Sonic artwork.
Yeah, artwork, the games. I've been playing the games ever since I can remember. I played the original games on Sega Genesis, so I'm pretty acquainted with his look, and it's unmistakable. It's so easy. It's just some circles and some like curvy triangles. How do you screw this up? Your Hollywood people paid millions of dollars to do this, and you screw it up. How? I would not screw this up.
Especially when you consider, like, there's so many people on, like, Instagram, for example, like, so many fans of Sonic who have basically taken the official, like, stills from this movie, recreated it, and made a much better version looking, a much better looking version of Sonic, you know?
Yeah, I've been seeing that on Twitter. And that's another thing, right? He doesn't have the gloves. Why? His arms or his hands are just white fur.
That makes no sense. I never seen a hedge. I mean, I guess it's like a hedgehog. I don't know. It's like you think like at least the top of his hand would probably be like have like blue fur, but no, his whole hand is white fur. I don't know what they're saying realistic.
Weird.
Like
he needs the cartoon gloves. Come on, he's a cartoon character. His shoes, I guess, are they're okay. But here's the thing, right? Like his hands and like his feet, just all of his proportions are all out of whack. They're trying to make him look more human.
They're trying to make him look like a runner, you know? And that's the weird thing about it. The other thing that people keep pointing out is like the teeth, you know? Like he has human teeth for some reason.
I'm not gonna knock the teeth thing because like I feel like that I remember that being a thing in like Sonic Adventure, and I never really questioned it then. So that's probably why I didn't really question it now. I didn't even notice that myself.
Yeah. No, neither did I initially, but I'm like, still, it's not a big draw for me, but it's just one of those things that people keep pointing out on Twitter, you know? Again, like, for the most part, I've accepted the Sonic design, but all criticisms aside, I think I showed you guys this tweet ahead of time from Jeff Fowler, the guy who's actually directing the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. So I'm going to quote this real quick, because you're probably not going to pull this up on screen. Thank you for the support and the criticism. The message is loud and clear. You aren't happy with the design and you want changes. It's going to happen. Everyone at Paramount and Sega are fully committed to making this character the best he can be. Hashtag Sonic movie, hashtag gotta fix fast. So
I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty concise. Like, the director clearly acknowledges that, you know, the fans have an opinion, that, you know, this version of the character that they've created is just flawed. Deeply, deeply flawed. And, you know, they're doing the best in their power to fix it before, like, the actual theatrical release in November. Yeah, I mean, that really just tells you, like, the power of Twitter, you know?
Yeah, this is one of those times where, like, people complaining on the internet it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
I'm honestly surprised. Like, the fact that they're changing it all is, like, they felt like they were, like, very, dedicated to this design when I saw them voicing it.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I just don't know how they could think that this is a good thing. Like, how does it get past all these people? I think I read somewhere that Sega wasn't happy with how the movie is going, but all they can do, since they don't have creative control, is offer some suggestions. Which is funny because, you know, how many times has Sega screwed up Sonic in the past? So to think that they'd be the ones who are actually advocating for things to be not screwed up is...
I mean... Say what you will about Sega, they've consistently had pretty solid character designs, you know? Like, even if the games are just random, weird, and just outwardly strange, like, they've at least kept a consistent vision for Sonic. They've at least kept a consistent character model for Sonic.
Yeah. until Sonic Boom came out and they gave him some weird like scarf thing and a bunch of sports tape.
Well, that was like
Yeah.
that was like the same thing, I guess. Here they had some different team work on it, and they were like, "Oh, we gotta make Sonic look different. This is a different universe, so why not?" No one liked that either. It feels like this time there's like, let's just listen this time, I guess.
And, you know, there already is a good Sonic the Hedgehog movie. It's called Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie. It was an anime that came out, I think, in like 1999 or 2000. It might have been a different year, but I think that's when I actually bought it. I think it was at a Blockbuster I found it. How about that?
Yeah.
This movie was great.
It's really going into the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, this movie, like, it had everything that should have been in a Sonic movie. It even emulated some of the scenes from Sonic CD where he's like, I don't know, he's like running on these rocky pillars. He fights Metal Sonic, Robotnik's in it, Tails, Knuckles. It got pretty much everything you'd want. And it's so obscure that the DVD, if you look it up on Amazon now, costs like about $100. Even on eBay, it's expensive. So it's a really rare DVD. But, you know, of course, on the internet, there's more than one way to see a movie. So definitely find that. Sonic the Hedgehog anime movie. Check that out. You won't be disappointed.
That's another thing that surprises me, that they didn't have none of Sonic's friends, and I felt slightly relieved and then a little disappointed because, like, you know, I was kind of like looking forward to seeing how horrible they make his friends look, but at the same time, it's kind of weird that they're carrying the whole movie with just Sonic. That kind of makes me think they're gonna like end it with like, oh, here comes a sequel to this movie or something.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely implied in the trailer that he's from a different world, that this version of Sonic is, like, Green Hill Zone clearly exists in a different dimension or different universe or whatever, or however you want to quantify it.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of Sonic X, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's making me think that they're probably planning on making a sequel if this one does well, and they're probably going to include characters like Tails and Knuckles in that sequel. Mm-hmm. I know, like, the thing people have been pointing out about Jim Carrey at the very end of the trailer is that, like, that version of Robotnik, like, some time has passed. People are, like, pointing at the background of that as being, like, sort of strange and sort of alien, maybe alluding to the fact that they're in Sonic's dimension now, so...
Well, I mean, there's always been multiple zones in Sonic games, so
yeah,
they could be going to a number of locations. But, like, why didn't they just make it 3D animated, like Sonic and Robotnik had a cameo? I know, I always say Robotnik, not Eggman, because that's the name I grew up with in the original Sonic
it's
games.
Robotnik.
Robotnik! But,
Which, especially with this version, he's not Eggman yet. He's Robotnik.
He was originally Eggman, I think, in Japan only. Then Robotnik is something that we came up with in America. So that's probably why.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make sense.
And I had this old Sonic comic. I think it came with the first game or something. That was like the origin of Sonic. And it was originally Dr. Kintobor, which is Robotnik backwards, was experimenting with Chaos technology with the Chaos Rings. And he meets a small brown hedgehog called Sonic. And then, I don't know, he runs on some kind of cosmic treadmill in Kintobor's lab. And then that's how he becomes Sonic. And then, I think the doc spilled soda on the console, and then all the chaos energy goes blah, 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 and then he gets transformed into Robotnik. It's silly, but yeah, I was saying, why didn't they just make it 3D animated like Wreck-It Ralph? They have a cameo in that, and they look great.
Yes. That's the first thing I thought. Like, how good? Like, I was looking at the trailer, and it's like in my head, it's like, I just watched Wreck-It Ralph 2, and he looks fantastic in that.
Oh, so they brought him back for that. I actually haven't seen Wreck-It Ralph 2, but Ralph Breaks the Internet, whatever. But
should have been Ralph Wrecks the Internet.
Yeah, no, that would have made a lot more sense for branding purposes, you know. So this does lead us to one very important question. Mm-hmm. We're on The Flash Season 5. Will Sonic save the day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be there.
I hope so.
Will he defeat whatever the generic villain's name is? I've honestly forgotten again. Cicada
has taken away all your powers, but I have brought you something new. Flash chuckled. You mean the Chaos Emeralds?
It was all building up to it. The whole Flash series is building up to the movies. I'm surprised they took such a. I mean, he was an essential character, but turning him into his own spin-off movie.
If you look at it, Sonic has like lightning charged around him when he's running in the trailer. So who knows? Maybe he's got the Speed Force.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, but anyway, I thought the Sonic movie should have just been Pixar animated. And that would have been fine, and we wouldn't have to argue about the design.
Yeah, okay, so obviously that's
But
not
they're fixing
happening. Yeah, hopefully it'll actually look decent. I feel like if we give it a few months, this will all be history. We've been spending enough time on this that I think we can all agree.
Keep complaining on Twitter. They will hear the complaints and they will fix it. Keep photoshopping.
Hopefully they won't, I guess, fix something wrong.
Yeah, they won't make it worse. How could it get any worse?
I really don't think it possibly could,
You haven't seen DeviantArt, have you?
Okay. So, let's move on here just because we've been talking about this for about 15 minutes already.
Jesus.
Yeah, I know, right? So I know Paris just saw Endgame, so why don't we lead into some of that? I know we talked about this a lot last week, but there's still a lot to unravel, so...
Well, I think the main thing we wanted to quickly point out was, so we had a whole nice funeral for...
This part of the podcast contains spoilers for Avengers Endgame. Skip ahead to the 24-minute mark if you haven't seen it yet. Resuming in 3, 2, 1.
Alright, so going from here, spoilers. So who they didn't have a funeral for was Black Widow. She's just forgotten about. What the hell?
Yeah, so I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. So my main theory is, and I do agree, it's sort of weird that they didn't include any sort of they really brush over Black Widow's death, aside from the fact that it's meant to be this whole grandiose sacrifice to make sure Hawkeye reunites with his family. They really sort of ignore the fact that Black Widow even died in the thing after her actual sacrifice. So yeah, I mean, I was wondering why they didn't have a funeral. My main theory is, she might not even be well known to the public in the Marvel Universe. She might be, because she is the secret agent, because she comes from this background, she might have been in hiding this entire time and only comes out and fights when it's, really necessary, So what do you guys think?
I feel like, they kind of addressed it a little bit, but I feel like it wasn't addressed well enough, because someone asked, did you have any family? And it's like, I think we were her only family. That's the answer they got, so... Not even including her in the funeral is kind of weird to me, though.
All of the Avengers knew her, so why didn't they have their own little private ceremony or whatever you want to call it?
So, I mean, there is a possibility that they did, but it sort of does go in the whole lot. There is a line she delivers at the beginning where it's like, I didn't have a family before I was with, the Avengers. I mean, I forget what the exact line was, but it was something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely weird that they didn't show anything.
Yeah. So, obviously, like we said, they're making a Black Widow movie that'll be in the past. I think I had read somewhere that they're thinking it'll be somewhere between the first and second Avengers films.
See, that'd be cool. I mean, it'd be hard to pull off. I'm sort of picturing a Winter Soldier type thing where it's very much a covert mission. You're seeing her from a different angle. I was expecting it to be pre-Avengers. I was expecting it to be pre-Iron Man,
Yeah. But I mean, she's aged 10 years since that time, so how far can they go back?
Yeah, but I mean, it's Scarlett Johansson. She's the most beautiful woman on the earth. She has not aged that much. She could easily play a much younger woman.
I don't know. Well, I guess if Kelly could do it in the Orville.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, CGI has come so far. We've seen them de-age people to a much more dramatic degree, so I wouldn't
Michael Douglas, how good did he look in Endgame?
He looked awesome, yeah. They really brought him down, especially with the brief scene we see of him in the 70s. He's I don't know, he looks like a young Michael Douglas,
Yeah, compare that to Jeff Bridges de-aged in Tron Legacy from 2010. Mm-hmm. They've come really far in terms of how realistic it looks. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
even from Rogue One with Peter Cushing, I think that it looked more realistic in Avengers now than it did then.
Yeah, well, even Peter Cushing, at the time, I thought it was pretty realistic. Obviously, I knew in the back of my mind that Peter Cushing was dead, that he couldn't possibly be playing Grand Moff Tarkin, but I don't know. It did look pretty convincing,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, same deal with Carrie Fisher. Of course, she's only on screen briefly in Rogue One, but she the actress they had playing her looked and sounded exactly like Carrie Fisher. And of course, I saw Rogue One a couple days after Carrie Fisher had died, and that actually brought me to tears.
But yeah, so Black Widow, and this is an interesting theory, is there some kind of soul stone universe? Apparently there's some kind of pocket dimension that they're floating around in now. What happened when Steve brought back the stone? Did he trade for her life back? Can he even do that? What happened when he met Red Skull on that rock? Did he flip out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that the main universe Black Widow is probably, like, gone for good. Addressing the whole issue of, like, what happens with the Soul Stone. First of all,
what happens with all the continuity?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and we can explain time travel a little bit. I know we talked about it a little bit in the last podcast, but there's a lot to unravel there, and I've had some more thoughts in that sense. So, first of all, at least using the comics as precedent, there is indeed a world within the Soul Stone. So, and you know, Infinity War sort of alluded to that with the fact that, like when Thanos actually does release the snap initially, like he does see this younger version of Gamora in Orange Realm, which is probably the Soul World. So the Soul World,
right.
Yeah. So the Soul World does exist in the comics. I think it might exist in the films. Doesn't necessarily mean that's where all of the snapped victims went, especially since they completely lost their memories after they came out of the Soul World.
It seemed like they all woke up like they were just gone for a few seconds, or they just fell asleep.
Right. So what I'm thinking is, like, Adam Warlock was the main wielder of the Soul Gem in the comics. So there's a very real possibility that once Guardian 3 comes around, once Adam Warlock comes around, that he's somehow going to gain possession of the Soul Stone, and, like, they might explore that realm a little more. And again, we really, like, of all of the gems in Infinity War, of all the stones in Infinity War, the Soul Stone is probably the least known about. There's probably, like, more mystery surrounding it than any other stone that we see.
Yeah. And the thing I wanted to say about time travel is, if they could go to the quantum realm as they please, they could just bring in Black Widow from some other time, because, you know, like, if all these alterations they made don't actually retroactively affect their own timeline, then I see it more as all the timelines exist at once. Like, the whole entirety of their existence. It's just, you know, infinite different timelines are kind of projected onto, like, a sphere, and when they go in the quantum realm, they're basically traveling along the edge of this sphere, and they could just end up anywhere, and it doesn't matter if they pluck something from somewhere else, because all the timelines are kind of, or all the timeline possibilities are independently existing from each other. It's just like, like I said, going from one location to another. So,
I mean, again, that sort of explains, and I think the more I think about it, the whole time travel explanation they do give makes sense within the context of the universe, that you're essentially creating a new timeline every time you travel back in time, because every slight change brings about a slight alteration in the timeline.
Or that timeline was already always there.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it goes into relativity. It goes into, like, so many things that I wish I could explain, but, you know, at the end of the day, I'm not a quantum physicist, you know?
Well, even they couldn't explain this.
No,
if they could, we'd be somewhere else as a human race right now.
Yeah, but, so yeah, it does make sense. It also creates a potential problem for the MCU from a storytelling perspective. Like, if essentially character deaths are meaningless, if you can essentially bring characters back through time travel, if you can essentially, like, completely change the outcome of a battle through time travel, like, where are the stakes, you know?
Yeah, kind of true. They have opened a Pandora's box of storytelling by doing this.
Without a doubt.
But the thing with the whole alternate dimensions, I feel like was probably their soft, like, here's why they can't do that, because it won't affect their dimension, just these other ones. That's why time travel won't help them with, like, different problems, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, maybe. Who knows how they're gonna go from here. But veering off slightly from that, one thing that they are going to continue with is something we actually said they should do, a Ghost Rider solo series, but not quite what I was hoping for. It's going to be on Hulu, and it will be the Robbie Reyes version, the same guy reprising his role from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, what do we think about that? A Ghost Rider solo series, but not Johnny Blaze. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, I've obviously stayed away from a lot of the Marvel television. You know, aside from, like, Jessica Jones, Punisher, like, some of the shows that are genuinely, like, really well made, for the most part, I felt that it just is made as filler for Marvel fans. Ghost Rider was, like, one of my favorite comic characters growing up. I actually really loved the Nick Cage movie growing up.
Yes.
So, you know, obviously to see a live action version of him is just a cool thing by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, I mean, I'm anxious to see what they do with the character. I haven't watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I can't really comment too heavily on that aspect of it, but from what I've heard, he was pretty highly well-liked by fans of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so, I'm going into it with optimism.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, I didn't watch the series, but I've watched like clips and read about it. That version of Robbie Reyes was fairly faithful to his comic introduction, where in the comics he isn't possessed by Zadora. I think this is the name, or Zatharos, something like that. So which is
it's some iteration of the devil, yeah.
Yeah, that's the original spirit of vengeance, formerly the angel of justice. He was corrupted in hell. He's actually possessed by a vengeful spirit of, was it his uncle or something? It was like his murderous uncle. Something having to do with his uncle, who was featured in the show, but he's actually still possessed by the spirit of vengeance. It's hinted at that it's passed on from Johnny Blaze to him. So Blaze finally rids himself of the curse. So I guess from that perspective, it makes sense why they wouldn't go back to him if it's going to be set in the MCU.
Right.
But now here's the thing that confuses me. The last thing I saw about Ghost Rider in the show was that it was actually passed on to Agent Coulson, and then having the spirit of vengeance in him actually burns up all of his Kree blood, and that leads to him dying, which was the end of the last season. So, is this going to go after that, or is this going to be before that?
I have a strong feeling that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just went completely off the wall at some point, because that sounds like just the most ridiculous storyline.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some unbeatable villain, and so he gets the spirit of vengeance, and then she's like, "You can't defeat me!" And he just grabs her, and he's like, "Oh yeah," and he just looks at her, and she turns into the ashes or whatever.
I feel like I should watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. now. That actually sounds like legitimately pretty awesome.
They've had so many different weird things happen.
I don't know. I feel like I'd probably get into it. That's all on Netflix, right?
I think it is, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I should check that out. Yeah, I mean, you definitely know more about the timeline than I would. Yeah, it sounds like
all I know.
Yeah, it sounds like, at least for establishing the continuity they already have in the MCU. And the MCU is pretty good about maintaining continuity across films. I think it would have to be a post Coulson version of Ghost Rider. I'm not sure who would take on the. You said Robbie Reyes was the guy's name?
Robbie Reyes. So either the spirit went back to him when Coulson died, or this is just before that.
Yeah, I mean, again, an interesting thing about the Ghost Rider spirit is that, it's taken on enough iterations. I wouldn't be shocked. It has been possessed by multiple people at once before. It wouldn't shock me if it was able to go back to Robbie Reyes pretty easily.
Yeah, who knows if they'll introduce Danny Ketch, also known as the second holder of Ghost Rider in the comics. I think it was Johnny Blaze's brother or something, half brother, step brother.
No
who knows?
No clue.
Man, I just want to see the continuation of Spirit of Vengeance when he gets the blue fire.
Yeah.
I was so excited for that, but, business is as business goes.
Maybe they'll jump into interdimensional travel.
Maybe they'll go in the quantum realm and get all the Ghost Riders. I will say the one thing I like about the Robbie Reyes version, I kind of like his design, where his skull is kind of metal looking, and I like his car. But I still prefer the motorcycle and the classic, Grim Reaper skull design. So, I don't know, maybe Johnny Blaze will be a part of it. Maybe it'll be like the Nick Cage movie where he meets the rider before him, that old man who was on a horse. So maybe they'll ride together, hopefully.
Weren't there 4 different former hosts after, or a few before them or something?
Yeah, there's, the kind of continuity they established is that it's been different people throughout history.
Exactly, yeah. It's just, it's the kind of thing that's just passed on, from host to host, because there's always a need for that spirit to be in the mortal world.
There always needs to be a Batman.
Yeah. All right. So finally, something I've been wanting to talk about for a while is Star Trek, but specifically this week, tiny bit of news. Quentin Tarantino was once rumored to be developing a Star Trek of his own, and he said, yes, it would be an R-rated, violent, cussing one, which I don't know how that fits in the world of Star Trek, but you get, whatever. But he was asked specifically, he was still doing it, and he said, it's a very big possibility. I haven't been dealing with those guys for a while because I've been making my movie, but we've talked about a story and a script. The script has been written, and when I emerge my head like Puxatawny Phil, post Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is his upcoming movie, we'll pick up talking about it again. Now, we know for starters that the Kelvin reboots, as they're called, are kind of just dead right now. The series is like permanently on halt, and then they're doing their own, the other show on CBS Access Discovery, which is going into season 3, and then they have all this slew of other spin-off shows, children's cartoons, Rick and Morty type show, whatever going on.
And then there's the Orville, which is just objectively better than all of them, but let's ignore that for now.
Yeah, arguable. It's like, what kind of tone do you want? Personally, I think Orville, I think a lot of people believe this is more closely like original Star Trek.
I feel like a lot of classic Star Trek fans prefer the Orville to any modern iteration of Star Trek.
And that's been an issue, right? Because, like, right now, the whole rights situation with Star Trek is weird. Paramount used to own all the rights to Star Trek, but then once... it was the owner of Viacom, split it up into 2 companies. It became New Viacom and then CBS Corporation. CBS retained the rights to Star Trek and all of the TV iterations, and New Viacom retained New Paramount. Was it New Paramount? No, it's Paramount under the New Viacom retains the rights to Star Trek films. So, since CBS was like the de facto owner of all of Star Trek now, if Paramount wanted to make movies, they had to get an alternate license from CBS, which they did, and then they made the Kelvin reboots. And now all of these new Star Trek shows, including Discovery, are still being made under this alternate Paramount/Bad Robot license. So it's like CBS doesn't have the full creative control, I don't think. But I don't know. It's so weird going on with the rights issue. So if like Tarantino were to get a Star Trek film made, who would even be the rights holder? Is it part of the Kelvin timeline? I don't know what's going on.
Yes, I mean, again, I haven't really watched enough of the current iteration of Star Trek, the Kelvin timeline, to really have too much of an opinion. Honestly, I really don't care about the continuity of it enough to be concerned. So I haven't seen the first one for what it's worth, but Quentin Tarantino, the best director working in Hollywood today. There's no doubt in my mind that no matter what we see, it's going to be awesome. Yeah,
but Star Trek though, I don't see how that's a fit, because it's always been this,
I think
family appropriate, hopeful, idealist view of the future. I mean, obviously the reboots were more of like action films. But if you went with Tarantino, like, I guess, would it be more of like a deconstruction of all those ideals?
I really don't know. I mean, it has the potential to be something drastically different from any version of Star Trek we've seen. I saw some commentary on the subject where people were basically thinking that Quentin Tarantino would try to respect the original version of Star Trek, the 1960s TV series, as much as possible, and essentially make an updated version of that series. So throw in a little bit of camp, throw in... I mean, what else made the original Star Trek great,
Like the motherfucking phases on them Klingons, damn it!
Now I can kind of step in, because I just watched like literally every old Star Trek movie based on that series, like in the past year. It seemed pretty somber to me. Like they didn't exactly have like any 2 like moments where I expect like intense violence to be like involved at any point. But like they had action, so maybe it's one of this like take that action and step it up a bit while trying to keep the original tone. But I don't know how that will go exactly.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Discovery has been that they're saying, oh, this takes place 10 years before Kirk and Spock, but there was so many like discrepancies with the continuity in terms of the aesthetics, the kind of tech they're using, and so like season 2 of Discovery has all kind of been sort of trying to correct that. To the point where, at the end of it, spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it, they said it involved time travel. Again, back to time travel and alternate realities. That, the Discovery ship and all of its crew goes into the future. They go into, like, the 32nd century, where they're going to stay, apparently, for the time being. So they're just stuck in the future, and they're not coming back to this time ever again. I guess as a way for them to not have to be restricted by... the original series continuity. And then, Spock and the crew of the Enterprise all say it's the Starfleet. Yeah, since this involves time travel and one of the prime directives is to not interfere with historical events, we're putting an NDA on anything related to Discovery whatsoever. So it's like, oh, great. That's why nobody's ever heard of it in the rest of Star Trek.
Seems like a cop-out, yeah.
It's like it retconned itself out of its existence. when it tried to retcon itself into existence. So it's like they're saying to the fans, "Stop complaining, we got rid of it."
Yeah, I mean, it's prequel fatigue, you know? Like, every prequel seems to suffer from the same thing. Like, just trying to tie itself into this main continuity and just failing epically. Or, no, I shouldn't say failing epically, it's just a matter of, like, I don't know, not to beat a dead horse, but it's the same reason Captain Marvel didn't work, you know? They just tried so hard to connect with this established continuity, and just, I don't know, it didn't work. It felt like a slap in the face to, like, all the fans of the original franchise.
$1 billion says otherwise.
Well, the fans still, like, again, we can look at the critical scores. Fans were not happy with Captain Marvel. We've beaten this so many times.
I don't know,
We've
it
made
certainly had
multiple
some
videos on
audience.
this, so, yeah, no, there's people who liked it, but again, you look at the fan scores, it's, like, by far the most disliked Marvel movie to date. And I don't even hate Captain Marvel. Like, I think there are worse Marvel movies. But
it got an A on CinemaScore, which pulls people out of the theater from day one.
Yeah, whatever.
I'm sure that would be a comment.
Okay.
Yeah, so I really don't know how in Tarantino Star Trek would fit in, whether it be part of the reboots, part of it something else. Just everything's a mess right now. But we're almost at the 40-minute mark, so I'm going to cut it off there. This has been Utterly Nonsense. You know where you can find us, all the different podcast outlets, of course, always on YouTube. And we will definitely have segments coming out this week. Maybe a few from the Avengers review, if you haven't seen that. Mm-hmm. So be sure to look out for that. And we'll have more stuff like this. And I'm John. That's CJ. And that was Paris. And thanks for listening.
Epic music, play us out.
Gotta go fast.